Hello and welcome to Unit 2. Today we're going to be talking about settlers, or more importantly, who settled and why. In the last unit, we talked about the discovery of the Americas, and we also talked about the varying viewpoints, the varying representations that they had in common literature at the time. And we also compared and contrast these diverging viewpoints. But now we're going to talk about the settlers. So, after the discovery of the Americas, after the colonization, we get our first group of settlers, or people who came from what they call the old lands into the new Americas for varying reasons. And we're going to be talking about those reasons today. Was it for money? Was it for religion? Was it for liberty? All of these things mean very different things throughout time. And I want you guys to think about, what does money mean to these settlers? What does religion mean to these settlers? What does liberty mean? Liberty became a huge, and it still is today, a huge part of American identity and the way we describe America. This is the foundation of where liberty comes from, or where those ideas of liberties come from. So, um, liberty. So, where do these ideas come from in American culture? They started here, and more importantly, why did they go to the Americas to find all of these? So, today I have an excerpt from Of Plymouth by Plantation by William Bradford. You also should have seen a YouTube video describing the expedition. And today I'm going to be diving a little bit into the qualities of that video and supplementing it with the literature and from the actual essay of Plymouth Plantation. So, just diving into it, I'm going to read it out loud for you all. When I espy the travel and diligence of some godly and zealous preacher, and God's blessing on their labors, as in other parts of the land, so in the north parts became enlightened by the works of God, and had their ignorance and sins discovered unto them, and begun by his grace to reform their lives, and made conscientious of their ways. The work of God was no sooner manifest in them, but presently they were both scoffed and scorned by the profane multitude, and the ministers urged with a yoke of subscription, or else must be silent. And the poor people were so vexed with apparatus and pursuance, and the commissary courts, as truly their affliction was not small, which, notwithstanding, they bore sundry years with much patience, to their occasion, by the continuance and earnest of the troubles, and other means which the Lord raised up in those days, to see further into things by the light of the word of God. And as after they had lived in this city about some 11 or 12 years, which is the more observable being of the whole time of that famous truce between the state and the Spaniards, and sundry of them were taken away by death, and many others began to be well stricken in years, the grave mistress of experience having taught them many things. Those prudent governors, with sundry of the sagest members, began to both deeply to apprehend their present dangers, and wisely to foresee the future and think of timely remedy. In the agitation of their thoughts, and much discourse of things hereabout, at length they began to incline to this conclusion of removal to some other place, not out of any newfangledness, or such other such like giddy humor, by which men are oftentimes transported to their great hurt and danger, but for sundry weighty and solid reasons, some of the chief of which I will here briefly touch. And first they saw and found by experience the hardness of the place and country to be such as few in comparison would come to them, and fewer that would bide it out and continue for them. For many that came to them, and many more that desired to be with them, could not endure the great labor and hard fare, with other inconveniences which they underwent and were contented with. But though they loved their persons, approved their cause, and honored their sufferings, yet they left them, as it were, weeping, as Orpah did her mother-in-law Naomi, or as the Romans did Cato and Utica, who desired to be excused and borne with, though they could not all be Catos. For many, though they desired to enjoy the ordinances of God and their purity and the liberty of the gospel with them, yet, alas, they admitted to bondage with danger of conscience rather than endure these hardships. Yet, some preferred and chose the prisons in England rather than this liberty in Holland with these afflictions. But it was thought that if a better and easier place of living could be had, it would draw many and take away these discouragements. Yeah, their pastor would often say that many of those who both wrote and preached now against them, if they're in a place where they might have liberty and live comfortably, they would practice as they did. So, quick pause here. I would like to say at this point that they're still in the Netherlands, and he is making a case to go to the Americas. He's making a case to settle in the new land, and these are his reasons as to why. First is an appeal to the king. Here we have the first reason that. Long story short, this reason is that it is very difficult to live our lifestyle and our practice our religion freely. But if we had a place where we were free, it would be much easier for us to um, be one with God and to live our faith. And now I jump right into the next reason Bradford is making this claim um, for travel to the Americas. Secondly, they saw that those people generally bore all these difficulties very cheerfully and with a resolute courage, being in the best and strength of their years. Yet old age began to steal many of them, and their great and continual labors, with other crosses and sorrows, hastened it before the time. So as it was not only properly thought, but apparently seen, that within a few years more they would be in danger to scatter, by necessities pressing them, or sink under the burdens, or both. And therefore, according to the divine proverb, that a wise man seek the plague when it cometh, and hide it himself. Proverbs 22:3. So they, like skillful and beaten soldiers were fearful either to be entrapped or surrounded by their enemies, as they should neither be able to fight nor fly, and therefore thought it better to dislodge betimes to some place of better advantage and less danger, if any such could be found. So, the second reason we're making a claim to go to the Americas is because the people here in the Netherlands are pretty dangerous and they're all very scary. But if there were no dangerous, scary people around, then we could live in our faith more truly, more freely, more faithfully. Thirdly, as necessity was a taskmaster over them, so they were forced to be such, not only to their servants, but in the sort of their dearest children, the which, as it did not a little wound the tender hearts of many a loving father and mother, so it produced likewise sundry sad and sorrowful effects. For many of their children now were of best disposition and graceless inclinations, have learned to bear the yoke in their youth, and willing to bear part of their parents' burden, were oftentimes so oppressed with their heavy labors that though their minds were free and willing, that their bodies bowed under the weight of the same, and became decrepit in their early youth, the vigor of nature being consumed in the very bud as it were. But that which was more lamentable, and of all sorrows, most heavy to be borne, was that many of their children, by these occasions, in the great licentiousness of youth is that country, and the manifold temptations of the place were drawn away by evil examples into extravagant and dangerous courses, getting the reins off their necks and departing from their parents. Some became soldiers, others took upon them far voyages by sea, and others some worse courses tending to dissoluteness and the danger of their souls, to the greatest grief of their parents and dishonor of God. So they saw their posterity would be in danger to be degenerate and corrupted. So to summarize all of this, another reason that Bradford is making the claim for America is because the Netherlands is very hard to live in. We are trying to survive, and the children have such a heavy burden on them that they are being sickened, and they're losing kind of their faith really are in their youth. They're laboring a little bit too much for their age, and because of that, they're either being hurt as young people, or they are so willing to run away that they run off and leave behind their parents and their faith. So this is just an idea that the Netherlands um, is too hard on the family life. So if you had a place that were easier, a place that was easier to sustain, it would be better for us to achieve the kind of religious liberty that we're looking for. And the next reason, lastly, and which was not least, a great hope and inward zeal they had of laying some good foundation, or at least to make some way hereunto for the propagating and advancing the gospel of the kingdom of Christ in those remote parts of the world. Yeah, though they should be, but even as stepping stones into others, for the performing of so great a work. So this reason, quick pause, um, this claim to the Americas is also a way for us to spread the kingdom of Christ, to spread Christian values, and to spread these Puritan values, And here like to take a moment to identify the irony in this last point. So the entire reason that the separatists and William Bradford and his company were leaving the Americas was because they wanted religious liberty. They wanted religious freedom, and they were um, tired of the religious persecution that they were facing. And yet, here we have in this last point that the reason they are going to the Americas, one of the reasons is that because they would like to spread those religious values. So while they would like religious tolerance, when they go to the Americas, they are not necessarily looking to practice and extend that religious tolerance at all. They are instead looking to press and spread that religion. So it's a little bit of an ironic tone. It's kind of strange that they're not looking to extend um, religious tolerance and religious freedom to the Native Americans they meet. Instead, they are hoping to even spread and further propagate the Christian values that they themselves are being persecuted for. But jumping back into the text, these are some other reasons. These are some other like reasons moved them to undertake this resolution of their removal, the which they afterward prosecuted with so great difficulties as by the sequel will appear. The place they had thoughts of some of those vast and unpeopled countries of America, which are fruitful and fit for habitation, being devoid of all civil inhabitants, where there are only savage and brutish men which range up and down, little otherwise than the wild beasts of the same. The proposition being made public and coming to the scanning of it all, it raised many variable opinions amongst men and caused many fears and doubts amongst themselves. Some, from their reasons and hopes conceived, labored to stir up and encourage the rest to undertake and prosecute the same. Others, again, out of their fears, objected against it and sought to divert from it, alleging many things, and those neither unreasonable nor improbable, as that it was a great design and subject to many unconceivable perils and dangers, as, besides, the casualties of the sea, which none can be freed from, the length of the voyage was such as the weak bodies of women and other persons worn out with age and travel, as many of them were, could never be able to endure. And yet, if they should, the miseries of the land which they should be exposed unto would be too hard to be borne, and likely, some or all of them together, to consume and utterly ruinate them. For there they should be liable to famine and nakedness, and the want and manner of all things. The change of air, diet, and drinking water would infect their bodies with sore sickness and griefs, diseases, and also those which should escape or overcome these difficulties should yet be in continual danger of the savage people, who are cruel, barbarous, and most treacherous, being most furious and enraged and merciless when they overcome, not being content to only kill and take away life, but delight to torment men in the most bloody manner that may be, flaying some alive with the shells of fishes, cutting off their members and joints of others by piecemeal and boiling on the coals, eat the callops of their flesh in their sight whilst they live, and other cruelties horrible to be related. These troubles blown over, and now all being come back together in one ship, they put to sea again, with prosperous wind, which continued divers days together, which was some encouragement to them. Yet, according to the usual manner, many were afflicted with the sickness, and I may not omit here a special work of God's providence. There were proud and very profane young men. One of the seamen, a lusty, able body, which made him the more haughty. He would always be commenting the poor people in their sickness, and cursing them daily with grievous execrations, and did not to tell them that he hoped to help cast half of them overboard before they came to the journey's end, and make merry what they had, and if he or by any gently reproof, he would curse and swear most bitterly. But it pleased God, before they came half seas over, to smite this young man with a grievous disease of which he died in a desperate manner, and so was himself the first that was thrown overboard. Thus his curses light on his own head, and it was an astonishment to all his fellows, for they noted it to be the just hand of God upon him. So what could now sustain them but the Spirit of God and his grace? May not and ought not the children of these fathers rightly say, our fathers were Englishmen, which came over this great ocean, and were ready to perish in this wilderness, but they cried unto the Lord, and he heard their voice, and looked on their adversity. Let them therefore praise the Lord. because he is good and his mercies endure forever. Yeah, let them which have been redeemed of the Lord show how he hath delivered them from the hand of the oppressor. When they wandered in the desert wilderness, out of the way, and found no city to dwell in, both hungry and thirsty, their soul was overwhelmed in them. Let them confess before the Lord his loving kindness and his wonderful works before the sons of men. So, this last section, let's kind of talk about this. So, it was a rough journey to the Americas. It was difficult, it was very hard. It had a lot of trials and tribulations, as they say. And the kind of gist of this last section that I just read was William Bradford using that hardship to justify and kind of prove the existence of God and God's dedication to them and their cause. So the reason that things are hard are because God is testing them. Things are hard because God wants to increase their faith in them. And things are hard simply because hardship makes one's faith stronger in the Lord. But even in this hardship, there are small little lines of justice, and these small justifications are proof to William Bradford and separatists that what they're doing is the right thing. But let's kind of talk about this idea of liberty more important in your quiz. So far we've kind of looked at the history of the separatists. We've looked at the words that they used and propagated, and now it's time to think about them in the context of the Americas. So before we kind of talked about the different representations of America and how the Americas were represented, let's kind of extend that to the separatists. I'm asking you all to examine why the separatists believed that they needed to take the dangerous voyage to the Americas. And why do you think that they define such success through hardship? And what do you think they were doing with the Americas? So this question is twofold. First of all, how did the settlers view America? Second of all, what did the separatists want? And let's actually add a third question in there. Why did the separatists need the Americas to do that? And kind of as an extension to that, I kind of want you to think of how this kind of extends into present day and kind of the building of the American identity. So here's your quiz. Using the info presented in the video and in the excerpt from Plymouth Plantation, consider what the Americas represented to these settlers. In a 1 and 2 page paragraph, summarize the intentions of the separatists and examine why they believed that they needed to take the dangerous voyage to the Americas to succeed with such intentions. Again, you can use the excerpts that are in both this PowerPoint and this video. But if you would like to look at the whole document, you may do so, and it will be linked to your Canvas page. This concludes the end of Unit 2. Be sure to turn in this quiz, turn in this 1 to 2 paragraph. Tell me why the separatists needed the Americas and what they wanted the Americas for. And I will grade that as soon as possible. But thank you for joining me for Unit 2, and I will see you all in Unit 3. Bye.